And welcome to The Factor Off the Clock. And joining us now, Harris County former prosecutor and now criminal defense attorney, Bayoji Akingbola. So, Bayoji, we learned early this morning that one of the founders, one of the former owners of the Turkey Leg, had a very prominent restaurant, once prominent here in the city of Houston. People came from all over the country and outside of the country to go there before it shut down and the doors shuttered there. Nakia Holmes was arrested and accused of some crimes, and that's why we brought you in. What is Miss Holmes accused of now?
My understanding is that Ms. Holmes is accused of what's called hindering apprehension of a felon. And that's contingent upon another case. And so another case that involves another individual by the name of Jonathan Cezanne, it's alleged that on October the 8th, Jonathan Cezanne was alleged to have committed aggravated assault. And he was charged with that crime, which is a felony, by the way, a second degree felony. He was charged with that on October the 9th. Now, how Ms. Holmes gets involved in this is that, according to her complaint, she has been said to have hindered the apprehension of Mr. Cezanne on October the 15th, which would have been 6 days after he was charged. And that, of
And of
course, is a
course,
third
in
degree
this
felony.
case, he is accused of assaulting his ex-girlfriend, according to court documents. Do we know what the connection was with Nakia Holmes at this point? Were they just friends? Were they relatives? Do we know that at all?
Unfortunately, according to court documents, all we see with respect to Mr. Cezanne is what happened allegedly between him and the complaining witness in his own case. But with respect to Ms. Holmes, they don't show the underlying details of the arrest in the complaint. So, with respect to what the nature of the relationship was between Ms. Holmes and Mr. Cezanne and the complainant in Mr. Cezanne's case, that part is not known at this time, at least to us. That having been said, the connection that we do have is that the allegations is that Ms. Holmes hindered the apprehension of Mr. Cezanne due to his aggravated assault case.
And of course, Fox 26 is reporting that apparently the police department or investigators were watching her house. And when she left the house, they pulled her over immediately. And she said she hadn't seen this individual. But then they got a call from another officer saying the individual was seen going over her back fence. And according to court documents and Fox 26, she changed her story then. And they proceeded to arrest her. Now, we know her ex-husband, and I think she filed for divorce from Lynn Price, I think in 2023. And he is facing some federal charges or has been charged federally with arson. Do you remember the details or some of that case that involved the competition across the street, literally across the street from the turkey leg hut?
Yes, Bar 5015 and Turkey Leg Hut are located, as you said, on the same street. And this is some time back. If I'm not mistaken, I want to say it was around the COVID pandemic era, but my understanding was a few gentlemen had entered into Bar 5015 and they were actually captured on surveillance footage. I do have a distinct recollection of this being on the news at the time, captured
Yeah.
on surveillance footage, dousing the place with inflammable content and setting Bar 5015 on fire. After that investigation was done, it came back to Miss Holmes' now ex-husband that he was somehow involved in getting those individuals to do that. So it did lead to some federal charges on his case. That being said, I did want to draw one thing to the viewer's attention regarding Miss Holmes' case, what the prosecutors are going to have to prove because you've actually gave me some information that I wasn't privy to regarding how she was initially arrested. That being said, when you hinder apprehension of a felon, you have to know that that individual was charged with a felony. And so that's what the state's going to have to produce evidence of. That at the time, did Ms. Holmes know that a mere 6 days prior, that this individual, Mr. Cezanne, was actually charged with aggravated assault? If there's no evidence to show that she actually knew that, then they're not going to be able to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. I think the defense's best argument in this case is going to be, look, she at worst was naive and didn't know what he was involved with, but certainly that doesn't make her a criminal, but more a victim of her own naivete.
And you see that in many instances when police are looking for suspects, and that suspect may be connected to you, may be a friend, and you don't know what the hell is going on. And you say, look, I don't have anything to do with it. I don't know where this person is. That's, natural for a lot of people, common for a lot of people. But you're saying if you know this person is charged with a felony, a crime, and you try to hide that person, then there is the difference, and that's where you could be held liable and face criminal charges, or at least a prosecution.
Yeah, so let this be a teachable moment for the viewers. I'm not going to speak to Mrs. Holmes' guilt or innocence, but yes, if you have a loved one or friend and they're avoiding apprehension or avoiding arrest from law enforcement, and they come to you and they say, "Hey, there's a warrant out for my arrest. Can I lay low here?" At that point, you're aiding and abetting, and at that point, if you know, you are subject to a third degree felony offense. That being said, it remains to be seen if Miss Holmes, in this case, actually knew about Mr. Cezanne's criminal situation, whether or not he was actually charged with the crime. It remains to be seen if she knew that when she was having her interaction with law enforcement.
Now, if we look at a situation where she knew this was happening, are we looking at some serious charges here?
It is a third degree felony. So the range of punishment on a third degree felony here in Texas is 2 to 10 years in prison, or it could be upwards to 10 years probation. Now, these types of cases, as a former prosecutor, I can speak to this. On the grand scheme of things, these types of cases are kind of on the low end of felonies. I would be very hard pressed to see her looking at any serious prison time if she's found guilty. It's more likely than not on cases like these that you're probably looking at some form of probation. But that being said, as it stands today, Ms. Holmes is innocent because the state has not produced evidence
Absolutely.
to prove her guilt.
And of course, for those who are wondering, what's the process now? Once she has been taken into custody, will she be able to bond out? What?
Yes, so she's going to have to go before a judge to discuss bond conditions and to be formally arraigned. So she's made aware of the charges. She can enter in her initial appearance and plead not guilty. And that's going to kick the felony criminal process in this case. Down the line, what's going to happen is what's called an indictment. These charges are going to have to be presented before a grand jury. And what that looks like is at least 10 out of, at least 9 out of 12 individuals who consist of the grand jury are going to have to agree that there's enough evidence for the state to move forward in the prosecution of this case. So that's kind of like a gatekeeping role. If the grand jury, 9 out of 12 at the minimum, agree to that, her case is indicted and the state can continue prosecuting Ms. Holmes. And despite the fact that the grand jury may see that there's evidence, the state is still going to have to prove a higher burden of proof to find her guilty, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. So that process can take anywhere from 6 months to a year at minimum before this case is going to be resolved.
All righty. It's always tough, Bayoji, seeing such a successful Black business in the community go from being very prominent, known around the world, to what we're seeing now, which is the reality of life.
Yeah, it is very hard. I remember plenty of times going to Turkey Leg Hut, have a lot of fond memories there. Back actually in my days as a prosecutor, me and my DA friends would go there to eat all the time. So I'm hoping that this case does not stick for Ms. Holmes. I wish her all the best. If she's looking for an attorney, I'm very affordable. Come holler at me.
There you
You
go.
are not guilty, Ms. Holmes, and we would represent you to your fullest.
He's the expert. He's been on both sides of the fence. All righty. And of course, I can recall, even before Turkey Lake Hut was even on Alameda, I went to the first one on Washington Avenue. A lot of people don't know about that. That's where they
That's
started out
news
on
to me.
Washington
Yeah,
Avenue. So, all right, Bayoji Akingbola with us here on the Factor Off the Clock. We appreciate your time and your expertise, and we'll just have to see what happens here. Thank you for your time, sir.
absolutely. You have a good one.